I'm going to now see if Richard's there and if Richard Jennings could come on and take up his position in the panel.
Great, thanks Morgan. Hi there. So I guess hopefully wrapping up this little bit with some solutions that are happening now across the north of Scotland. So I work for SSEN Transmission. We are building out 20 billion investment in the infrastructure from Dundee up to Peterhead, across to Bewley, over to the Isles, over to Skye, up to Wick, across to Orkney, and including Shetland as well. And there's also work in Argyll and Bute. And SSEN last year decided to take a slightly different approach to housing based on a lot of conversations with stakeholders, in that we'll be accommodating, just for this programme alone, somewhere between 5,000 to 6,000 staff in the north of Scotland along those various corridors. And typically the solution is temporary accommodation villages. Take a farmer's field or brown field or another empty space, scrape it off, put the gravel down, put utilities in, put some pods on top, some leisure facilities, and it's a self-contained unit. Take it away after 4 or 5 years, and frankly there's nothing left behind other than one landowner probably gets a reasonably good check, and there might be some investment in the local community, but largely you won't see the long-term impact from having had that workforce in the area. And we're also very cognizant that after the work that's going on around the infrastructure programme, there'll be another round of infrastructure. So this takes us to 2030. And after 2030, there'll be another round of infrastructure investment to strengthen the grid, improve the grid, build new grid connections, bring all the offshore connections onshore, take the offshore across to Europe, and so on and so forth. Developments not wanting to preempt planning, like Corrie Glass, which are pump storage hydro, again, thousands of workers over many years. So as Morgan was saying in the introduction, there's billions being spent and thousands of workers coming to the north, but we want to avoid them just coming for their project and disappearing again. And we want to see if we can create an environment where people move, stay, but also leave behind a better legacy. So the plan is that rather than just doing accommodation villages, we're using that income that would be spent on temporary accommodation solutions to build new homes, refurbish existing homes, bring disused assets back into use, former care homes, former hotels. And the exit strategy for that will be back into either community use, affordable housing, some of it will be market housing. And the sums of money that will be spent, rather than just simply not touching the sides, will instead be spent on actually developing out new houses. We've got a target to build out 1,000 homes over the next, I guess it'll be the next 2 to 3 years. And we're not doing this from scratch. So essentially, as people know, there's an awful lot of housing development that's stuck because it doesn't quite make the hurdle rates, or there's another problem with planning or road consent or roundabout or whatever it might be. And the funding from this can often unblock it. And to put that into context, just as broad averages, the cost of an affordable home in the central belt's probably around about £180,000 a unit. You get to Inverness, you can do it for 220. You get to Golspie, it's 320, and you go off to the Isles, it's 400. And the further away you go from the central belt, the lower the rent gets. So the higher the debt you have, and the lower income stream that you've got. So essentially that equation does not work. And at 60% levels of grant funding, it still doesn't work, because you're holding, your 40% you're holding is a much higher level of debt with a lower potential rental stream. So it doesn't really work in the current grant process. So we're looking to pump prime that and reduce public subsidy into affordable housing. And as most people know as well, with the grant reductions that were announced over a year ago, a lot of housing stalled. Even with grants being uplifted, it's quite hard to get those going again because other things have happened in the meantime, or the sites have been moved on, or they've not got detailed planning and they need money spent on them. So we can come in, we can do the early stage investment, and we can commit to long-term leases that will allow the landlord or the asset owner to raise a significant amount of capital to pay down the debt burden and effectively leave a much more lasting legacy for those homes. It will be a blended mix. It's not, we talk about high workforce numbers, but we're estimating that about 55% will require some form of formal accommodation. The other 45% are a mix of people who already have accommodation solved, or they solve their own, or there's a large workforce that actually is looking for somewhere to put a caravan down. Quite genuinely, they are a workforce that travels across the UK doing infrastructure projects, and that's their way they work, and that's the way they're contracted. So it's still a large number of people. We are naturally dealing with, so the challenge, if you're an RSL and you're a reasonably well-established RSL with debt facility, you can engage in this program. You can say, great, we'll take those units. We've got an exit strategy. If you're a small RSL or a small entity that doesn't typically raise debt, how do you mobilize quickly with an organization like SSEN, which is about to spend 20 billion and is therefore geared up to go at pace with all its systems and its processes? So we are trying to navigate the space and help people come on board on this program who couldn't possibly don't probably have the permanent staff to engage with an entity like SSEN Transmission. However, there are community groups that are approaching us and saying, we've got a small community opportunity here, what can we do? So we're building a blueprint. I this morning had a conversation with Scottish Power Energy Networks, who are doing the exact mirror from the central belt down. So we go to Bewley, they go down to the borders. They have a similar program to bring this part of the grid down to the connections on the border and down into England. And they've also got offshore as well. So we're not the only player in town. You've got the Scottish Power Energy Networks, you've got the Freeport and everything that's happening around there. And as I say, you've also got the floating offshore. So we're trying to create a blueprint that says, if you're doing infrastructure projects, yes, temporary accommodation might be the right solution in some places, but in an awful lot of places, if you work a little bit harder, you can actually use that same amount of money and actually less money, because temporary accommodation is very expensive, to invest in long-term housing solutions and provide a cash boost to the housing problem that Morgan pointed out genuinely exists in the Highlands at the start. So anyway, happy to take questions, but that's our plan. That's what we're doing. And if we get halfway to 1,000, I'll be delighted. I think we're already over halfway. So, but I've got to see them built. That's the main challenge.
No pressure there then, Richard. A lot of activity to go ahead. So I can